So welcome to the SecureDynamics TechCast. With me, I have two past guests who are joining me here together for the first time. I have Les Correia, who is the Global Head of Application Security at the Estée Lauder Companies, and I have Venky Rangachari, who is Vice President of IT at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Welcome, Les. Welcome, Venky.
Thank you, Ashwin.
Yeah, thanks, Ashwin. And nice
Great.
seeing you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
great to have you back. So I'm going to start with this whole concept of DSO or DevSecOps, which I know individually from we've been talking about. But the first part of a DSO is now security becomes everybody's responsibility. So let's start with you, Les, in terms of that is a big mind shift, especially for a company or a CISO that has traditionally, let's say, who has been working in a silo. And how does he or she now kind of make sure that the organization embraces this cultural shift?
Well, it is more complex than that, right? Because there's some kind of organizational change management, because it's not easy to just change behavior. And therefore, I think one has to go much further than that, right? The first thing is, deal with agile transformation, and then gradually seep this, awareness, security awareness training. But to do that, one has to first understand the complexity of the environment, because many large organizations are kind of siloed. So you have to try to ingrain this kind of collaboration and develop, champions and so on. The reason I say champions is because you teach these concepts and let the education propagate through different organizations and silos. I could go on, but let Venky. Venky might have some other ideas too.
Yeah, DevSecOps is basically a cultural shift of development and security working together, right? And I think to enable that, that cultural shift, one of the things that you want to do is embed security people within development organizations, right? And that's how the whole concept of security engineering came about, is that you have these people who are security architects or application engineering groups who probably know more about the application, because traditionally what people did was scan the application and say, here are my vulnerabilities, application team, go fix it, right? And it's a sequential step, and that doesn't happen because that then makes the process not as agile. So the real value is having these experts or champions who can then take that call, whether that vulnerability or that risk highlighted by the tool or that issue is a high risk, what is the impact of that, and make the decision, empower those people to make those decisions right then and there, right? I think that confluence and that merging of security skills with the traditional development skills, I think where DevSecOps is, right?
Yeah, can I add one more? Yeah,
Sure.
thank you for that. In fact, cross-training, I think, is another big aspect, right? Because oftentimes, right, if you're a security person or if you're a technologist, you don't necessarily understand as much of how the business runs. And similarly, developers don't get, they have different, goals and aspirations of hitting at speed and so on. And therefore, I think, sitting different groups within, so that they can understand the day in the life of, say, a developer or, or a business analyst and so on and so forth. That is also a critical aspect. Thank you.
And in terms of skills, right, just to add that, in terms of skills, I found that application engineers can be cross-trained into security, and they provide a lot better value because they already have the application knowledge and the skill sets from a coding standpoint, right? And they can get engaged. The key thing is to get them engaged earlier in the development process, so they can set those architecture goals, what's the requirements up front, as opposed to being a back-end process where after you finish development, say, hey, security, tell me if I passed or not. That's almost too late in an agile world, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so just kind of so I know both of you mentioned this embedding and cross training. If you take it up a level, right, when you kind of talk at the C-suite level or even the board level, right, where how do you make them understand the impact of this transformation, right? So they're hearing SolarWinds or Mimecast or Sunburst or whatever, right? And they hear these nuggets and they say, okay, what about us? So is there opportunity to kind of not piggyback on this, but really use this as a vehicle to kind of up level the conversation and like what kind of tools do you think CISOs can use to make their peers understand the impact as well as the board?
Les, you want to take a
Yeah,
shot?
well, this is actually a loaded question because it's the whole concept of the human behavior and all that. In fact, that's maybe a topic by itself and much more. But essentially, it's, one has to explain in context, right? The best way is to teach based on human emotion and all that stuff. So when we say security champions, actually most of us already do some form of security, regardless of whether you're in the field itself, because you do certain things today. You have a password. You expand, and get further on explaining in that context. And so at a very high level and at the board, in fact, today most board level people need to know, and in fact are bound to know more about security. And if not, they try to, because that's how things are evolving. But again, creating these champions and creating embedding security right through all life cycles and processes only helps. I don't know if have I answered the question.
No, it's great. I mean, I think kind of what I was kind of probing too is sometimes, I mean, there's obviously activist boards, but there are also kind of boards that are like wake up whenever there's an event of notice, right? So in terms of how do you use DevSecOps as a trigger, if you will, to get their attention when there is not a compelling event that's going on over there, and how do you kind of raise the value of that? So
I can give you maybe an example to
Sure.
this, right? I mean, there are a lot of parallels between DevSecOps and board conversations, maybe an odd combination, but you can see parallels, right? I mean, one is that, the boards are used to dealing with known challenges where, for example, you have a comm committee, right? You have set of practices. You can go and put some regulations around it. You can do some research, come back to the board. When you're dealing with cybersecurity, you're dealing with the unknowns,
Yeah.
and it's a mind shift. It's actually a cultural change that requires board members to sort of see that there's a lot more unknowns there that they don't know, and your CISO might not know, right? And the real question to ask is, yes, you have SolarWinds and a lot of these other attacks that have happened and compromises that have happened, is how does that impact you? What is your high risk mean impact? So when I had my presentation, I always look at, what are my high risk factors and what is the risk to the company and risk to the information or data, right? And then prioritize those and then make that as an information sharing piece of board, and at the same point in time, also have an open forum. I think the best conversations that you have are outside the boardroom, right? I think board members today are keen to understand the landscape of cybersecurity and get more comfortable, but might not feel as comfortable within the confines of a boardroom. So best is to have a offline setting where you can get more educated on cybersecurity, the real threats, and then it can be a joint partnership with the board and maybe some board members are champions, right? And just like your champions in DevOps. And then those board members could then take the lead in aligning the board objectives with the cyber objectives. And in that way, it can be better explained, understood, and aligned, right?
In fact, that's a good point, Venky, because there's another aspect in the concept that's often used actually to improve, right? It's communities, and you alluded to that. Communities, which are a combination, I said earlier, of business people and developers and security practitioners and so on, where you meet. You create these communities that collaborate and communicate. So each one is almost, you're cross-training each other to think in a secure way to understand. And this way, the message gets propagated. You're literally, it's happening by itself. It's evolving. And that is actually a technique that's being used. That's why I said it's behavior things, where it hits right through, and you build those communities all across the company. Depending on how large or small, it's the same concept. You can do it even communities outside of your company itself, right? To spread the message, both in an organic way. Thank you.
No, great conversation. Yeah, and you're spot on, right? I think that the ability to kind of not just put that on a PowerPoint or a Word document and kind of talk about it, like you said, just
in fact, that's probably the worst. Most of us detest, PowerPoints because it's flash. But the real thing is talking by experience, and like for example, Venky or Ashwin, you've said, this is how you do it, and it's these communities where you share ideas. Most of us, right, get our ideas from our communities within the industry itself and others. In fact, I get most stimulated by such conversations, not only here, in other networks around the globe. And it's amazing because we were just talking earlier before this TechCast started. Hey, I spoke to so and so in India. I spoke to so and so in Ukraine, or the Far East, and so on and so forth. So, but it's common today.
Great conversation again. Thanks, Laz. Thanks, Venky, for your time, and looking forward to a future conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.